Every single student at Northgate High knew the boiler room was off limits. We were all told it was for our safety, that it was just a mess of old pipes and bad wiring. It was a believable lie, and for 3 years, I never questioned it. My school, Northgate High in Walnut Creek, California, was built back in 1974. It has its share of strange quirks, so one dangerous room didn't seem out of place. But then I saw what they took out of there during the annual maintenance lockdown. I realized the rules weren't to protect us. They were to protect it. You get used to the strangeness of Northgate. It just becomes normal. New kids might question things for a week or two, but after that, you just accept it. You learn the real rules, not the ones in the student handbook. First, the bell schedule was complete chaos. It was never the same 2 days in a row. Sometimes a class was 47 minutes. The next day, it could be 82. The administration told our parents it was some kind of optimal learning cycle. We just knew we had to check the schedule posted every single morning and hope we didn't have a surprise test in a class that was suddenly 20 minutes longer. Second, there was quiet time. At least once a month, the PA system would crackle on, and the principal's voice, always a little too calm, would announce the start of quiet time. For the next 10 minutes, everything stopped. No talking, no walking. You sat at your desk with your head down, in perfect silence. Our teachers would watch the classroom door like hawks. They called it a mindfulness exercise. But the look in their eyes wasn't mindful. It was fear. It looked like they were listening for something, waiting for a sound they hoped would never come. And the strangest rule, the one nobody could ever explain, was no red ink. You couldn't use it on homework, in your notes, not even for a little drawing in a textbook. If you were caught with a red pen, you were sent straight to the vice principal, Ms. Albright. There was no detention. Just a long, quiet talk where she'd stare at you with this unsettling intensity and ask where you got the pen. Then she'd take it and send you back to class with a warning. We all figured it was just some weird school policy. For 3 years, I just followed the rules. My best friend Liam used to joke that the school was built on an ancient burial ground. I always laughed it off. The building itself was this ugly, blocky concrete structure that people said was designed by a prison architect, which kind of explained the oppressive vibe. The weird rules just seemed to fit the weird building. It was Northgate being Northgate. But a lie only holds up until you see the truth for yourself. The truth started revealing itself during the first lockdown of my senior year. It was early September. They called it annual maintenance, just like always. This wasn't like an active shooter drill. There was no panic. It was more like an hour-long quiet time. As soon as the announcement was made, our teacher, Mr. Henderson, shut off the lights and pulled the heavy blinds closed. His face was white, heads down. "Not a sound," he whispered, his voice tight with tension. I was in a history class on the ground floor with a window that looked out into the service alley. At the end of that alley was the metal door to the boiler room. The blinds were thick, but one of the slats was bent just enough to see through. After 20 minutes of total silence, I couldn't stand it anymore. I leaned over and peeked through the crack. I saw them, Ms. Albright and 2 janitors I had never seen before. They weren't doing maintenance. They were standing guard on either side of the boiler room door. The door slowly creaked open, and a figure emerged. It wasn't a person. It was tall, impossibly skinny, and it moved with a twitchy, disjointed walk. It was wrapped in shadows, like it was a hole in the air, shaped like a man. It didn't walk so much as it flowed. The 2 janitors escorted it down the alley, behind the gym, and out of my sight. Ms. Albright watched them go, her posture rigid, before pulling out a set of keys and locking the boiler room door. Then she looked up, her eyes scanning the windows, and for a heart-stopping second, I was sure she saw me. When the lockdown ended, nobody mentioned it. It was just another weird Northgate drill. but I couldn't get it out of my head. That night, I started digging. I went through the school's online archives, then the public library's old records. I was looking for anything unusual about Northgate High. I found the first piece in a newspaper from 1974, when the school was being built. A construction worker had died. The official story was that he fell into a concrete pour. But a small side article said his coworkers told a different story. They claimed he was pulled. They said he heard whispers coming from the foundation right where the boiler room was going to be built. Then I found a missing person report from 1978. A sophomore named Kevin Marks. His friend said he was last seen heading to the boiler room on a dare. He was never found. The school paper from that week had a note from the principal, reminding everyone that the boiler room was off limits. The last piece fell into place with an article from 1986. Someone had broken into the school and splattered red paint all over the hallways. The article was weird. It wasn't about the cost of the vandalism. It was about the school being closed for 3 days to reset the environment. An anonymous student was quoted, saying that during those 3 days, you could hear screaming coming from the service wing, even when no one was there. A worker pulled into the foundation. A student gone forever. A bizarre, violent reaction to red paint. It all led back to that one room. The rules weren't rules. They were containment procedures. The bell schedule was the key. Liam always said it was random, but it wasn't. I spent a week charting it against a lunar calendar. The class times got shorter and more chaotic during certain phases of the moon. But on the night of a new moon, the schedule was almost normal. It was the calm before the storm. The annual maintenance lockdown always happened on the first new moon of the school year. That's when it was weakest. That's when they moved it. And quiet time? It was always at 1:13 p.m. Every single time. I didn't know what that time meant, but the consistency was terrifying. It was a ritual. They were keeping it calm with silence. I knew I was being stupid, but I had to see it for myself. The next new moon was on a Friday. I told my parents I was staying late for a study group. During the last class of the day, I slipped into the boys' locker room and hid in an unlocked maintenance closet. I just sat there in the dark, smelling the old sweat and shoes, and I waited. Hours went by. The school fell silent. This silence was heavier, deeper than quiet time. Then I heard the PA system crackle to life in the empty school. A single low tone echoed through the halls. It was a sound I had never heard before. It was time. I crept out into the dark hallways. The only light came from the emergency signs. Every step I took felt like a thunderclap. As I got closer to the service wing, the air got cold. I could feel a low hum through the floor. I got to the service alley and peered around the corner. The boiler room door was slightly open. This time, I didn't stay outside. I slipped through the door. It wasn't a boiler room. The old boilers were just pushed against a wall, thick with dust. In the center of the room was a pit, a perfect black circle cut into the concrete. Strange symbols were painted on the floor around it, connected by lines of salt. Heavy chains were bolted to the floor, leading to the edge of the pit. The room smelled like ozone, damp dirt, and something metallic like old blood. A sound came from the pit, a low, wet, chittering whisper. It was the sound of something trying to remember how to talk with a voice that was never meant for human ears. The whispers seemed to swirl around me, promising things, begging to be let out. My head started to spin. I felt this horrible urge to step closer. Then I heard footsteps in the alley. I ducked behind one of the old boilers, just as Ms. Albright and the same two men walked in. They weren't janitors. Their faces were grim, their movements practiced. They were keepers. They carried heavy bags and began to reinforce the salt lines and check the chains, working in total silence. They were rebuilding the prison. The chittering from the pit got louder angrier. A wave of pure despair washed over me and was so strong it made my knees buckle. The thing in the pit knew its chance was gone. One of the men dropped a bag, and the metallic clank echoed through the room. Instantly, the whispering stopped. A new sound took its place, a deep growl that I felt in my bones. From the pit, a single pale arm, thin as a tree branch and with far too many joints, shot out with impossible speed. It whipped through the air and cracked against the concrete floor, right where the sound had come from. If the man had been standing a foot to his left, he would have been torn in half. I didn't wait to see more. I scrambled backward, out the door, and I ran. I just ran and ran until I was blocks away from the school. My lungs on fire, the sound of that growl burned into my memory. The next Monday at school felt completely unreal. The bell schedule was normal. Kids were laughing. In history, Mr. Henderson was talking about the Civil War, his face perfectly calm. It was like nothing ever happened. But as I passed Miss Albright in the hall, she looked right at me, and her eyes weren't surprised. They were just cold. It was a silent warning. You know, so now you're a part of it. You will keep the secret, or else. I understand now. Northgate High isn't a school. It's a prison. The principal and the staff aren't just educators. They're wardens, performing ancient rituals to keep something horrible locked away right under our feet. They know what happens in the boiler room. And now I do too. I have to wonder, how many other schools have a place like this? A door that has to stay locked? A list of strange rules that aren't for the students, but for the thing they hide. The rituals have worked so far. But what happens on the day they don't?